Speaker.
I call Jonathan Young.
Thank you, sir. And can I just acknowledge the speeches so far in this very important debate. And, sir, this is it's been touted as a great victory for workers in New Zealand, and I'm not going to speak on that. But, sir, I want to say it's also a great response of the committee process in which this Parliament works, and how a bill went to the Select Committee that had aspects of it, sir, that submitters disagreed with. And through that process of submissions, our committee, 11 members, sir, heard the views of employers and employees, came to some great discussions, and with the assistance of some very intelligent and very balanced officials, came up with recommendations back to this House, which, sir, by and large, as the Minister has said, addressed this issue around zero-hour contracts. And I acknowledge my colleague on the other side of the House, Ian Lees-Galloway, who brought further amendments to the Committee of the Whole that this House supported, which has taken what the committee did one step further. Sir, it's important for us to understand, and I think I make my remarks today to acknowledge the work of the committee process. Sir, Mr. Lees-Galloway's description, which he gave on Tuesday evening, of zero-hour contracts as being permanent part-time agreement, a permanent part-time agreement with no fixed hours of work, sir, is something which I added a further dimension to in that speech on Tuesday evening, saying a zero-hours contract to be a permanent part-time agreement with no fixed hours of work, but with the obligation to be available at the exclusion of accepting other employment opportunities. And so it is this definition which our committee addressed and, in my mind, brought an end to zero-hours contracts according to the definition which I have talked about this afternoon. Because a casual employee can have an agreement or an understanding with an employer to be a permanent part-time employee with no fixed hours of work on an as-when-needed basis. They can simply agree to that, and it can become a casual employment arrangement, which fulfills Mr. Lees-Galloway's definition, but they are still free to pick up other employment as it is available. And there are many, many thousands and tens of thousands of casual employment agreements that work for not only the employers but the employees in our nation. But as soon as the employer says you are to remain available in case I need you, and that means you can't accept any other employment, but you'll only get paid for the hours you work for me, as soon as that is stipulated, it becomes a zero-hours contract. There is no mutuality of obligation between or certainly from the employer to the employee. And so it is that definition, that expression of an employment arrangement, which I believe everybody in this House completely disagreed with and in the committee disagreed with. And so we worked hard to ensure that that was changed. In fact, if you go back and read the comments of the committee to the bill as we reported it back, it says this: we do not believe that availability provisions should be banned. Employment situations exist where these provisions are used appropriately and benefit both employer and employee. Maintaining flexibility in employment relationships is a legitimate policy goal. However, we agree with submitters that the bill could better express the policy intent of upholding mutual obligations in these relationships. It goes on to say, we therefore recommend amending proposed section 67E3 to require genuine reasons based on reasonable grounds for including an availability provision in an employment agreement. And the crux of a zero-hour contract is this availability requirement. And so, sir, what we did when we came back, we altered the bill, we agreed on it, we deliberated on it, brought it back to the House. We said an availability provision must not be included in an employment agreement unless the employer has genuine reasons based on reasonable grounds for including the availability provision, and the availability provision provides for the payment of reasonable compensation. And so the reason why we wanted that is because we wanted to ensure that employers were very, very careful that they actually genuinely needed to have an availability of a worker. And that if they genuinely did that, and it wasn't because they were lazy in rostering and lazy in managing the workflow, but actually the job required some extra availability, that they would ensure that there was reasonable compensation for that. So there was never, ever, ever going to be a time when somebody would be held back from doing any other work, sir, and not be paid for it. And so, sir, I think that we did some great work on the committee. I want to congratulate the officials. I want to say thank you to the members of the committee, and I think also, as Andrew Little, Leader of the Opposition, has made a comment today, sir, which I think is worth noting, that this Parliament has done a good job for the people of New Zealand.